This is Beyond a Reasonable Doubt with your hosts, Mark Garrigus and Gary Smith.
Hey, welcome, Gary, to the Ultra Bar. 2 weeks in a row, I haven't dressed up for you, but maybe next week I'll go back to putting on my Sunday best. How are you today?
I'm well. I think the bigger headline for 2 weeks in a row is you've got your controversial bookcase behind you, which people seem to have opinions on.
Yes, they sure do. It spirals in the back. And by the way, all the court appearances I've done from sitting right here by Zoom, nobody's ever commented on, but reasonable doubt it somehow affects the listener brain. So I'm not gonna run away from that. I'm gonna kind of double down.
Yeah, it's vexing how that seems to have become such a controversial topic, but people like what they like and are confused by what they don't. So it's good to have you back nonetheless, Mark. I know you're enjoying your time in New York, and we're appreciative that you carved out a little time to join us here on a Sunday.
Yeah, well, we've got a special guest later on, but I couldn't help but notice that for anybody who's listened and has been following our long-standing battle with the city of Burbank, and when I say we, I've been defending Tin Horn Flats in a variety of contexts. Both they're getting sued by the county of LA. We're suing the city of Burbank. Both have engaged in scorched earth litigation tactics after their scorched earth, putting Tin Horn Flats out of business and basically stopping a 50-year kind of a local institution.
Erecting a giant fence that was cemented into the ground and permanently established around the premises. I mean, it's
basically eminent domain without any legal process, basically. And we've got a trial date set for December. And as those who've watched, we've had a constant battle with the then city councilman, Konstantine Anthony, who's now currently the mayor of Burbank, which is mind-boggling. And not only the mayor of Burbank, but running for one of the county supervisor posts, which just goes to show you that you can fail upwards spectacularly. And he has now reached the national consciousness in this past week. And Gary may have a explanation as to why.
Well, I do. I not only have an explanation, but I also have a video clip here. He has caught the ire of Fox News, and they have started focusing on him and watching his movements. And he has become much more media savvy, willing to do, various media appearances. And he's taking some, extreme positions, some may say. That's in the eye of the beholder. But here's a clip from.
I don't think that there's anybody who can question that this guy. Well, I'll let you. I won't. That's objection leading question.
Like I said, in the eye of the beholder, there's not a lot of people I know who wouldn't call some of his opinions extreme, but that's not to say that there aren't people out there who I think might agree with him. But I would assume that's a minority. But as I said, he's caught the ire of Fox News, and they have been paying attention to him as of late. I've seen a few comments on him from them, but this is the most recent one that I saw from Jesse Waters' show.
Spanky Burbank, California's homeless, Uber-driving, anti-police, thespian, communist mayor.
So sorry, let's just give a little context here. If you are watching this on YouTube, youtube.com/reasonable doubt podcast, please go check that out and subscribe. You will see here on the right is a video of him being spanked by a drag queen. Now, this is something that Fox News picked up on a week or two ago. And so now Jesse has dubbed the mayor Spanky Burbank, which is I think objectively kind of a funny nickname. So let's watch the clip.
Mayor,
by the way, I hadn't put the two together. It reminds me of when Dave Chappelle was doing his shtick on Jussie Smollett, and it took me 90 seconds to plug in. It was the same thing with this. So
yes,
I apparently early onset here.
No, it took me a second to put it all together. Spanky, but it is pretty. Once you put it together, it's pretty funny. But here, let's just check that out.
Burbank, California's homeless, Uber-driving, anti-police, thespian, communist mayor is even more deranged than we knew. After getting spanked by Foxy Roxy Wood, telling Fox he wants to abolish the police and prisons, we discovered a Spanky Burbank podcast.
What is a woman?
A woman, to me, is the opposite of a man.
What is a man?
Well, that's another question, isn't it? Because to me, that's just the opposite of a woman.
Can a man get pregnant?
It depends on the man.
So Spanky's not a biologist, and he shouldn't go anywhere near children.
Grown men sexually dancing like they were at a burlesque show or at a strip show. That was totally normal in front of kids.
You ever seen the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders?
What about the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders?
Same stuff.
But a child is allowed to take $1 bill, walk up to a drag queen and put $1 in their pants.
Right. I don't understand what's a problem with that. It's money. What's the issue?
Spanky Burbank is pro-children, stuffing cash down a drag queen's G-string. He's also, let's chat about nudes and gender bending in 3rd grade.
Jodie Foster is a woman, and she made me question my sexuality when I was a child because I liked her so much. Oh. And she was nude in the film Nell. Not that I remember watching it several times as a child. Wow.
Come on. That was hilarious.
You can close it. Why was it funny, though?
That's very funny.
Your kid's in a Zoom class, a 3rd grader. And is it appropriate to show that video to a 3rd grader?
I think so. I think that is a totally okay video.
And remember when Antifa attacked parents protesting queer theory in class? You guessed it. Spanky is pro-Antifa.
They showed up to provoke the parents, and they got.
No, they didn't.
Of course
yes,
they did.
Dude, parents,
you were not. You
the
were
parents were already provoked.
The guy that got hurt, he was arrested.
Mm-hmm.
He had a criminal record for molesting a 13-year-old kid. Did you not see that?
But I
he
don't
was linked
know
to
the
Antifa?
person. If he's linked, he's linked. So what does that matter?
Why was he there?
Why was he there?
To
Why
protect the people who didn't get hurt
from
the
Sunland?
LGBT.
So in case you're keeping score at home, he's now Spanky Burbank, the Antifa-loving, anti-cop, communist, Uber-driving, drag queen-spanking former homeless mayor who's into sexualizing your son at school. We have a feeling that Spanky is in this for attention because he changed his online profile to Mayor Spanky right there. But the Burbank City Council doesn't find Spanky's shenanigans very funny.
To me, a line has been crossed. While it may be entertaining to argue or witness banter on social media, the quips and renaming of accounts, it stops being fun and stops being entertaining when that banter affects our city. The city staff has wasted at least 30 hours or more of our taxpayer money on this issue. We on the council have been asked to consider removing you from your role.
Ooh, Spanky Burbank, this close to being removed, which makes sense since Spanky wasn't even elected mayor. The city council appointed him mayor. Congrats, you appointed the worst mayor in America.
You know, it's so fascinating. You know, I believe that was the city manager that he showed at the end of that. I believe so. Yeah, because, by the way, with the Tin Horn Flats debacle, which is the only way you can, this city manager who's frustrated because the city is being mocked over this guy who is, you know, whatever you think about his opinions, this gentleman is truly unhinged. I've done the depots. Anybody who's watched him, if you watched him in the city council hearing where Alexandra in our office appeared with him, this is not a well man. And the city manager here is complaining about city staff wasting their time with people responding to his antics, so to speak. Can you imagine how much time the city has invested, the city of Burbank, into the county lawsuits against Tin Horn Flats, the city citations prosecuting Lucas Lepedjian for basically just being the son of the owner, and the city prosecutor defending and prosecuting and basically stealing the property for governmental purposes because they had the temerity to do takeout food and let people eat on their patio during a time period when a Superior Court judge had already ruled that outdoor dining prohibitions had absolutely no scientific basis. I would just conservatively estimate that they have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in resources on that. And when you think about that and what he's done now, it's astonishing to me that the people in the city of Burbank put up with this nonsense. I don't get it.
It's very hard to fathom, in my opinion. It appears that was not necessarily the city manager, but currently a council member, Tamala Takahashi. But nonetheless, it's mind-boggling, given the way the city of Burbank is run and the way that their emphasis on rules and stuff like that. The fact that they are allowing their elected officials to focus on things like this, even now going into 2023 and closer to 2024, it's just mind-boggling that things like this are allowed and that the citizens are not rising up in disgust.
Well, I mean, I think the city council clearly needs to take action, as she was accurately pointed out. He was appointed by the council. He's not elected as mayor. It's one of those peculiar municipal deals where they kind of rotate the mayoralship depending on the composition of the city council. They're not unique. That happens in a lot of cities. But clearly this guy, all the writing was on the wall. I don't know what they were ignoring at the time. I mean, if you take a look at, we've done this in the archives of A Reasonable Doubt. If you take a look at his behavior during the Tin Horn Flats Zoom proceeding, which maybe, Gary, you could layer back in here a couple of his things where he's talking about Rosa Parks and just kind of unhinged comparisons that you have during that. They get what they deserve, I suppose. But finally, I think they're coming to their senses there that this guy has led them down a path of no return.
Yeah, absolutely. And just because you asked for it.
The idea that the health of this and the science is debatable, and simply because there's a debate, we can throw out all of these orders. That is ludicrous. That is not the way you run society or government. You do the best you can. You get the smartest people in the room. You take a democratic vote and you pass laws and ordinances. And if they're wrong, they get changed. And if they're unconstitutional, they get thrown out in court. But you take them as they come and you follow the law as it is.
Yeah, 1 second before you play the next. By the way, to show you how out to lunch he is, Alexandra had just pointed out to him in that proceeding that the judge of the LA Superior Court, the day before they started these shenanigans, had ruled that there was no science, had cited the fact that the top health czar in the state of California had said there was no science, and that the only reason that they had banned outdoor dining was to get people to congregate indoors. He had just taken the world and flipped it on its head, but he goes farther. Go on.
Yep. Let's play the rest of it. And for anyone watching on YouTube, youtube.com/Reasonable Doubt Podcast, Alexandra Kazarian is one square up and to the left of him. And she's a fun watch, especially for these next few seconds.
Rosa Parks actually had to sit in jail after she was taken off the bus. She did her time. I mean, granted, she did change the law. The courts came down and ruled in her favor, but she still had to pay the penance for violating a lawful order at the time. It was a lawful order at the time. So we have to look at the time and the dates that we have before us.
Okay, let me give you two things. Lucas Lepedjian was arrested not once, not twice, 3 times by the city of Burbank. A judge found that those were unlawful arrests. So boom, boom, boom. And they took the business, unlawfully took the business.
It's
unbelievable. And look at, if you're listening and you can't see the YouTube, all of the city council, all of the people, the city attorney, everybody is on screen just bobbing up and down with this nonsense. where in the face of a LA Superior Court judge who had ruled, he's saying, well, you got to sit there.
I'm so glad that we have these clips archived because, just for anyone who's not put it all together, that was, approximately 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago. And the city council has since decided that person should be mayor.
Yes, exactly. And now he's being publicly mocked. And I know a lot of people say, well, it's Fox News. No, I think literally on either side of the spectrum, people have objectively said this guy is a disgrace.
Yeah, I've seen that clip. I've seen the Fox News clips and clips like that on accounts that are definitely on the other side of the political spectrum on social media. There's really not anyone who can't make fun of him. It's absolutely ridiculous. All right, Mark, should we get to our interview that we have coming up here?
Yes, please. I read an article. I'm in New York, and I was reading the New York Law Journal, and there's a gentleman who has Professor Gershman, who has taught at Pace, I believe, law school for decades. He wrote the treatise on prosecutorial misconduct, and which I have invoked, I can't tell you, countless times, and former prosecutor himself, and wrote an article this past week called The War on Prosecutors, which I found fascinating because it's kind of an extension of the sociological and legal morphology that I've followed of what has been happening in our culture. So without further ado, Gary.
Yes, Professor Bennett L. Gershman from Pace Law School. Enjoy.
Jewelry is having a big moment right now, and with hundreds of products popping up in your feed every day, it can be hard to find a brand you trust. Alex and Ani has been creating meaningful jewelry for over 20 years, designing pieces that connect you with all of life's important moments. With an emphasis on value, there's truly something for everyone. You might be most familiar with their signature charm bangle. This bracelet literally created the category of meaningful jewelry and had you stacking charms from your wrist to your elbow. This piece is an icon for a reason. Completely size inclusive, each bracelet is adorned with a symbol designed to tell your story and express your unique style. Beyond the bangle, you'll find stylish, affordable jewelry for every occasion, from classic pieces to bold statement looks. Don't know where to start? Alex and Ani makes it easy to unpack the trends you're after and sprinkle in your personality too. Each piece comes with a personalized message and meaning, truly making it the perfect gift. You can take comfort in knowing that you're shopping with a socially conscious brand as well. To date, Alex and Ani has donated over $60 million to nonprofits worldwide, connecting fashion and philanthropy in an easy, fun, affordable way. Visit alexandani.com right now to discover the confidence that comes with a perfectly accessorized piece of jewelry. Right now, Alex and Ani is offering our audience 20% off with code MIDAS at checkout. Again, head to alexandani.com. That's alexandani.com and use code MIDAS at checkout for 20% off your order.
Well, we have a very special guest, and thanks to Gary for reaching out. The good professor here, who Gary can tell us a little bit more about, authored an article that caught my eye, and I was just fascinated by it. Professor, it was was it in the New York Law Journal that I saw the attack on prosecutors? Give me the exact title, because it caught my eye and the article was fascinating to me.
It was published this week in the New York Law Journal, and the title was The War on Prosecutors. I think it was picked up by law.com somewhere, but that's the gist of it. I mean, I write for the Law Journal quite a bit, and I write about prosecutors.
I sure do.
So this area, this issue struck me just recently as I was kind of watching the way the attack on prosecutors was evolving, over quite a number of months, and then it sort of put it all together, seeing it as more of a pattern than isolated incidents. So that's the gist of it.
So what's interesting to me, and the reason it jumped out at me, I've been talking about for about, I don't know, the last couple of years, I guess, as a primarily criminal defense lawyer, and that's kind of my background.
Sure.
I have watched the flipping, if you will, of of the general kind of ideology of the left and the ideology of the right. The right has traditionally, at least in California, if you look at the morphology of three strikes and victims' bill of rights and things like that, has always been the party identified with law and order. And the left has always been on the side of kind of challenging that. And now you've gotten to the point where that, at least ideologically, has flipped. And then your article, if you could talk about your thesis here in the article, is fascinating to me because it takes it one step farther.
Yeah, I agree, Mark. I followed California politics and criminal justice, obviously, for forever, watching you comment for many, many years. And I'm very admiring of you. And I was a prosecutor for 10 years in New York City, and I prosecuted virtually any kind of case you could think of. And then I became this law professor, and I wrote a book called Prosecutorial Misconduct, which is a treatise on the do's and don'ts of prosecutors. To me, when New York State has very recently enacted a law to really a specialized disciplinary agency to investigate misconduct by errant prosecutors, by prosecutors who violate the rules, who deviate from what's proper. And this commission is the first of its kind in the country. But it's sort of supposed to look at prosecutors who violate the rules. But now, as I was looking at what happened in Florida with Governor DeSantis removing prosecutors who are trying to do the right thing twice, and then you saw the absolute, almost shameful conduct of these Republican chairmen of these House committees, where they were attacking the Manhattan District Attorney for indicting Donald Trump on the hush money scandal with the porn star. And then they were attacking the Georgia prosecutor for indicting Trump. And you see the way they were attacking Merrick Garland last week. These are Republican legislators who seem to feel that they're part of Trump's defense team. And
it's really astonishing when you look at it. Right?
It's astonishing. It's almost unbelievable, because these are the same people who, you look at, they're weaponizing the Justice Department, say, but what did Bill Barr and Trump do when Barr was the head of the Justice Department? I mean, that was one of the most almost unbelievable periods in our history, where the Justice Department was almost like the lawyer for Donald Trump, attacking individuals who were critical of Trump, dismissing charges against some of Trump's cronies like Roger Stone and Michael Flynn. Barr says, the Mueller investigation was really a charade. There was nothing there to show that Donald Trump obstructed justice. And then, you see that these progressive prosecutors who are trying to provide reforms in criminal justice, they're being tarnished and thrown out of thrown out of office, like the recall of District Attorney Boudin in San Francisco, and now I think they're targeting the DA in LA. And then you have these statutes.
I mean, there's a lot of people who don't believe the DA in LA will even make the general election. I mean, he's got 4 primary opponents, and he's been linked to the kind of the retail smash and grab, and you show all of that. And it's an interesting kind of, I don't know, from my standpoint, it reminds me, maybe it's part of my vintage, of what we went through in the 80s in California, that sparked, as I mentioned before, the 3 strikes movement, Marsy's Law and the Victims' Bill of Rights and things like that, where you would take a certain instance, you would run with it. And that was the right who was doing that at the time. And now it seems to, this time though, it's a little bit more schizophrenic, because you're doing that and attacking the progressive prosecutors at the state level. And at the same time, you're attacking the the prosecutors who are doing, whether it's federal special counsel, Jack Smith and things like that. There's a little bit of a schizophrenia about it, to my mind.
Clearly. I mean, the shoe is on the other foot now. And as you look in Texas, you look at Georgia, these legislatures are passing laws seeking to remove prosecutors who really don't buckle under to what the agenda that they want. In other words, the Texas prosecutor law is going to remove prosecutors who aren't prosecuting abortion support, persons, doctors who help women get an abortion. If they do that, they're violating a Texas law, and the prosecutor should prosecute them. They should prosecute low-level marijuana offenders. And if they don't, they'll be removed from office. I mean, this is intimidation on prosecutors. We want you to prosecute what we want you to prosecute. And so the whole idea of prosecutorial discretion, independence, impartiality, things that have been so the norm in prosecutorial conduct forever are now being taken away. And a prosecutor is going to be told, if you don't prosecute the way we want you to, we're going to get rid of you. Think of that for a second. I mean, the prosecutor is supposed to vindicate the rule of law. And now the prosecutor is being intimidated, prevented from doing what the prosecutor is supposed to do by these Republican, schizophrenic, crazy people. That's exactly right, Mark.
And what's fascinating to me, and people who don't know your history, you've been a professor at Pace for a number of years, and you mentioned before the treatise you wrote, which I have invoked. I quoted liberally in motions with prosecutorial misconduct. You're not one of these guys who's an apologist for the prosecution by any means.
I'm not an apologist, and I'm not a bomb thrower. I try to call it the way I see it. I love good prosecutors. I talk to prosecutors all the time. Many of my students are currently prosecutors. And I revere the job of the prosecutor to do justice. Can you imagine, doing justice, vindicating the rule of law, protecting constitutional rights at the same time? I mean, the prosecutor's job is an incredibly difficult challenge. But the prosecutor is serving the public. He's also making sure that the defendant doesn't get harmed unfairly. The prosecutor represents justice, our justice system, and the good prosecutors do that. The rogue prosecutors should be removed, should be disciplined. But the vast majority of prosecutors, I think, are trying to do the right thing, whether it's California or New York or Atlanta, Georgia. But now we're seeing that the norms have now been broken. I think that Donald Trump started to break all of these norms, and now we're seeing so much that is so ugly in our criminal justice system, in the sense that everything is being changed around, and we don't know, where to go really.
It went so, and I'll confess my biases. I mean, I often talk about how 25 years ago my career was kind of changed by doing battle with the independent counsel during the Clinton days and representing Susan McDougal and things like that. And that whole fight back in the 90s led to the repeal or the expiration, I think, more properly, of the independent counsel law. But now we have special counsels, which I've always, is just a first cousin to the independent counsel, and I've always had a problem with. What do you think about the idea of independent or special counsels? Because we've got not only Jack Smith when it comes to Trump, but we've got David Weiss when it comes to Hunter Biden. We've had various incarnations of that. We had Durham's as appointed by Barr. Does that give you any problems? Special counsels, independent counsels, things like that?
Yeah, Mark, that's a great question to talk about, to think about. I was a special counsel when Governor Rockefeller was in office. New York City had one of its worst corruption scandals. Police were on the take, judges were on the take. And so Governor Rockefeller enacted a commission to investigate corruption in New York City. And I was one of the bureau chiefs in that new commission. The idea is you're trying to create a prosecutor who is independent from politics, who has no connections with any of the people that you're investigating, because the local DAs at that time, we had 5 counties in New York City. The local DAs were very close to some of the people that we would be investigating. In fact, we indicted one of the local DAs. So the idea is you want to have an independent agency, beholden to nobody, can just look at the facts, look at the laws, and indict. I mean, that was why Merrick Garland appointed Jack Smith. So there wouldn't be any suggestion that the Justice Department under Garland was working with Biden, to do this investigation. But I've always felt that a special counsel, I know Ken Starr was a special counsel also, and there was a great deal of criticism of them. The theory of a special counsel is to pull the prosecutor out of any political connections that the prosecutor has. And we know that every state prosecutor is elected. Federal United States attorneys are not elected, but they're appointed by the president, where the Senate in that jurisdiction supports them. In theory, I think a special prosecutor can make a difference for the good. I know that.
Yeah, so the people who would criticize, and I've heard this repeatedly, Ken Starr, I'm on record as having all of the issues with him during the Clinton impeachment era. And then Jack Smith, I now hear the same people who were championing the Ken Starr, complaining, and by the way, and missing all of the kind of Republican internecine connections there, complaining about Jack Smith and the fact that he had the ultimately failed prosecution when he was U.S. attorney of the governor of Virginia, and I say ultimately failed because U.S. Supreme Court reversed it. How do you get to a independent or special counsel? And for those who don't know or aren't in the weeds, it's a function. The difference in the name is a function of the legislation. How do you get to a point where people aren't taking pot shots at the person that is getting appointed to do the independent evaluation, prosecutorial evaluation?
Mark, it depends on which side you're on. If you're on the one side that is against the people that the special prosecutor is investigating, you hate the special prosecutor and try to find all sorts of things to criticize. Jack Smith, by the way, happens to be, in my estimation, one of the most straight-shooting, no-nonsense, non-political prosecutors anywhere in America, different from Ken Starr. But again, if you don't like what the special prosecutor is doing, you're going to be criticizing that prosecutor and be attacking that prosecutor. But again, we're seeing today that different kinds of attacks. It's one thing to criticize a prosecutor. It's another thing to remove him from office, like DeSantis did. It's another thing to enact legislation that says if you don't do what this legislation requires you to do, you're going to be removed from office. This is very different. It's very different where a congressman, a chair of a committee, is saying to local district attorneys, we want to tell us what your files are. We want to know what your investigation is all about. We want documents. We want to know that. I mean, this is crazy stuff. I mean, there's a rule that federal courts don't interfere.
Yeah, I'll take you one step farther. So you've got the situation now in Georgia, and I think what you're touching on is they've passed a law in Georgia, and you have a situation where the legislature, which is Republican controlled, could potentially remove Fani Willis from this the case, the prosecution, if you will, of Donald Trump and the 18 co-defendants. Isn't that what you're referring to?
Exactly. And they tried to do it first. They tried to get the governor to go along with removing her, wouldn't do it. And then they felt their alternative. Well, okay, we're going to pass legislation to make it sure that prosecutors follow the law that we want them to follow. I mean, prosecutorial discretion is something that has been embedded in our prosecutorial culture forever. Discretion means that prosecutors have limited resources and they pick and choose the kinds of cases they think would be appropriate for their prosecution. They look closely at the facts. If they feel they don't have enough evidence, they won't charge. But charging, giving immunity, plea bargaining, all of these things are just embedded in the prosecutorial function. And now the idea that prosecutors can no longer exercise informed discretion. Prosecutors is presumed to be acting properly. Prosecutors are presumed to be basing their decisions on the evidence, on the facts. But now, people who don't like the subject matter, the prosecutors are investigating, are now, screaming and yelling and passing laws that make it. If I were thinking of becoming a prosecutor today, I might think twice about it, because it's now something that, if you're not following the orders of your political benefactors or something like that, you shouldn't be doing it. It's as I said in the article, these are not normal times, and what we're seeing today is something so extraordinary, something we've never seen before. And I'm sure, Mark, you don't, a federal Congress telling prosecutors, we want you to tell us what you're doing, what your investigation was all about. Give us your documents. This is unconstitutional, really. It's in terms of the separation of powers.
It's as you say, it's an astonishing time that we live in. I going back, and I could sit and talk to you for hours. We haven't.
Right.
I've already exceeded the time of the show, but the interesting thing to me in Georgia, at least, is you're seeing where at least Mark Meadows moved and a couple of others to have the case removed to federal court. The judge there ruling against them, going up to the 11th Circuit, and it appears that at least that the 11th Circuit will probably, if you're going to prognosticate, is going to try and moot the whole issue by saying that the statute wouldn't cover somebody who's not currently a federal official, and then that would set the stage to get it to the U.S. Supreme Court. One of the things that from the cheap seats where I'm watching this, I say that may be the ultimate irony here is that you've got a state court judge, as opposed to the federal judge, who is traditionally comes from a Federalist membership background and has been a little bit more quizzical when it comes to the proceedings. I've been watching the proceedings as they're televised. There seems to be an irony in that they want to remove it to the federal court, the defendants do, but they may actually be getting more traction in the state court. Have you seen that, or do you have any comment on that?
I think it is an irony, as you say, very clear irony. And it's also an irony that, Republicans have always been states' rights. We want the states to do the job. Federal government should not be usurping the power of the states, and here it's just the opposite. It's just the whole thing is being turned around on its head. But look, I think, Federalists sometimes they see the Constitution the way they want to see it, but they can see violations. They can see where separation of powers is being violated here. And I think the Georgia judge, the state judge, seems to be a straight shooter. And, the whole idea of removal is so narrow, and there's got to be some kind of a federal hook, some federal issue that requires a federal court to take charge of the case. There's nothing even close to a federal issue in the Georgia prosecutions, in the New York prosecutions, and the New York judge already denied removal. It's a narrow area where obviously they're scared that the state is going to they think maybe they'll get a better more comfortable hearing in from a federal judge, but we're seeing desperate actions by desperate people. That's how I see the defendants in Georgia. That's how I see the other cases. But again, you can't really predict anything today, given the times that we're in.
The last question I'll give you, because it's also something I'm fascinated by, and I'm sure you've thought about a lot, is one of the ways, or how do you feel about prosecutorial immunity in the context of prosecutorial misconduct? Do you have an opinion on qualified immunity?
I've written about prosecutorial immunity. I'm not crazy about it, but I understand the theory of it. But I have written an interesting article where I said that if prosecutors engage in bad faith conduct, conduct where they deliberately are trying to violate somebody's rights. For example, Brady violations, where they bury evidence of that might be exculpatory. My feeling is that in those cases, there should be an exception to prosecutorial immunity for bad faith conduct by prosecutors. And yeah, you have to show, I'm saying it's easy to show that they're deliberately violating somebody's constitutional rights. But if you can do that, you shouldn't get immunity. That's my sense here.
As of right now, I know it's almost a bromide, but right now, prosecutors, other than when they're acting in an investigative capacity, they get qualified immunity to protect.
No, absolute immunity for anything non-investigative. Absolute immunity, which is very, very, I think, difficult to justify. They say it because they want to not chill a prosecutor's exercise of discretion. And here we get back to discretion. But there are situations where prosecutors shouldn't receive any kind of immunity, where they really do deliberately try to violate defendants' constitutional rights, and sometimes prosecute innocent people, as you well know. The thousands and thousands of innocent defendants have been convicted, spent many, many, many years in jail, maybe even executed.
Yes, exactly right. Well, I'm going to bring you back because I can talk to you for hours on these subjects. I appreciate it. I recommend anyone who's listening or watching, read the book, read the article. You've really done your homework in these areas. And I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Glad to be with you.
Thanks for listening to Reasonable Doubt. Subscribe on YouTube at youtube.com/Reasonable Doubt Podcast.